My name is Thomas Gray, and I was one of the few people who survived the sinking of the Titanic. I was only 23 years old when it happened. I did not have money. I did not have a big name. I just had a dream to start a new life in America. I never thought that one night would change my life forever. I still remember the ship, how big it was, how beautiful it looked, how everyone smiled like nothing bad could ever happen. But behind the music, the lights, and the rich clothes, something dark was coming. And when the cold water touched my feet, I knew this was no dream. This is my story, a story of people, choices, fear, and hope, a story of the last night on Titanic. Chapter 1. The first time I saw the Titanic, I arrived at the port in Southampton on the morning of April 10th. The sky was cloudy and the wind was cold, but I did not care. My heart was beating fast. I was about to see the biggest ship in the world, the Titanic. I walked through the crowd with my small suitcase and looked up. And then I saw it. It was like a floating city. It was taller than any building I had ever seen. The metal sides were clean and white. The name Titanic was written in gold letters near the front. People were everywhere. Rich men in suits, women in long dresses, workers with tools, and children holding their parents' hands. I held my ticket tightly in my hand. It was for third class, the cheapest part of the ship. I did not care where I slept. I just wanted to go to America. I wanted to find work, to learn English, and to build something better for myself. This ship was my chance. When I walked onto the deck, I looked around like a boy seeing the world for the first time. The wood smelled fresh, the metal was shining, and the sound of voices and music filled the air. It felt like I was walking into a dream. A man in uniform pointed me to the stairs that led to third class. I smiled and thanked him. I was nervous, but I was ready. That was the first time I saw the Titanic. I did not know that it would also be the last. Chapter 2. Life on the ship. The first days on the Titanic felt like a dream I did not want to wake up from. Every morning I woke up early in my small room below the decks, where I shared the space with 3 other young men. We were all traveling to America for a better life. We talked about our dreams, our families, and what we hoped to find when we reached New York. Even though we were in third class, the food was better than I had ever eaten at home. We had warm bread, meat, soup, and even some fruit. The workers on the ship were kind to us, and they smiled when we tried to speak English. I did not understand everything, but every day I learned a new word or two. I listened carefully, repeated sounds in my head, and wrote down simple sentences in a small notebook I carried in my pocket. In the afternoons, I walked up to the deck where I could see the sea. The water was endless and calm. Sometimes I stood there for hours just thinking. I imagined my life in America. I saw myself working in a factory, learning fast, saving money, and maybe one day opening my own shop. I also thought about love. Maybe I would meet a girl, start a family, and live in a small house near the city. Those thoughts gave me hope. 1. Evening. I heard music from the upper deck. I followed the sound and found people dancing and laughing. Some were rich, dressed in fine clothes, but some were simple like me. I did not join them, but I watched with a smile. For the first time in many years, I felt free. But deep in my heart, something felt strange. I could not explain it. It was like the sea was too quiet, like the sky was watching us, I shook the feeling away. I told myself it was just fear of the unknown. I had no idea how true that feeling was. Chapter 3. The night. It happened. It was Sunday, the 14th of April. The day was peaceful and the sea looked like glass. The sun had shined during the afternoon, and people said it was the most beautiful day of the trip. At dinner, everyone laughed and talked. Some people took photos. Others played cards or walked on the deck with music in the background. I wrote in my notebook that night. I remember the words clearly. This ship feels like the safest place in the world. After dinner, I went to bed early. I was tired from walking all day and wanted to get some sleep. I lay in my small bed and listened to the soft sound of the ship moving through the sea. I closed my eyes. Then, just before midnight, I felt something strange. It was like the ship shook for a second. Not a big crash, just a soft, quiet movement, like something touched it gently. People in the room sat up. We looked at each other. One man said, "Did you feel that?" Another said, "Maybe we hit something." We waited for a minute, but everything seemed fine, so most of us went back to bed. But then the hallway lights turned off for a few seconds and came back on. That, was not normal. I got dressed quickly and went out to see what was happening. In the hallway, people were talking in low voices. Some looked worried. A crew member walked by and said it was nothing, just a small problem. But I could see in his eyes that he was nervous. I went up to the deck. The night was very cold, and I could see my breath. I looked out into the darkness. I could not see anything, but I heard a sound, like water moving too fast. I walked forward and saw some officers talking. One of them shouted, "Get the lifeboats ready!" And that's when I knew something was very wrong. Chapter 4. Panic in the dark, I ran back downstairs to find the others in my room. They were already dressed and their faces were pale. One of them said he heard that the ship had hit an iceberg. Another said water was coming into the lower part of the ship. None of us really understood what was going on, but we knew we had to move fast. We followed the crowd up the stairs. The halls were full of people now, men, women, children, all moving in different directions. Some were asking questions, others were crying. I saw a mother holding a baby with one hand and a suitcase in the other. A man was shouting for his wife. It felt like a dream, but a bad one. When we reached the main deck, the air was freezing. The sky was full of stars, but the sea was black and endless. People were standing in groups, holding each other, asking the crew what to do. I saw the lifeboats hanging on the side of the ship. Some were already being lowered into the water. But there were not enough. The officers began shouting, "Women and children first!" That's when the real panic started. Men were yelling, some were pushing, others trying to stay calm. I stood back, watching it all, not knowing what to do. I had no family with me, no one to protect, just myself. One officer tried to bring order, telling people to wait, but many didn't listen. I saw one man try to jump into a lifeboat. He was pulled away. The crew were doing their best, but there were too many people, and not enough boats. And then I heard it. The sound of water rushing inside the ship. A deep, loud sound. I felt the floor move under my feet. The front of the ship was slowly sinking. People began screaming. It was real. The Titanic was going down. Chapter 5. A Race Against Time. I knew I had only a few minutes to decide what to do. I looked around and saw that most of the lifeboats were already in the water. Some were full, others half empty. The officers were shouting faster now, trying to get more people into the last boats. The ship was sinking faster than anyone expected. Walked along the deck, helping people where I could. I gave my coat to an old woman who was shaking in the cold. I carried a small child back to her mother. In that moment, we all forgot who was rich or poor. We were just people, fighting to stay alive. I reached the back of the ship. There was one lifeboat still being prepared. A young officer shouted, "Any women or children left?" But there were only men standing nearby. Some were begging to get in. The officer pointed at me and said, "Can you row?" I nodded without thinking. "Then help us," he said. He gave me a place at the edge of the boat. I sat down, my hands shaking, heart racing. We waited for a few more people, and then the boat was lowered into the sea. The ropes creaked. The cold wind hit my face. The moment we touched the water, it felt like ice. I could see small pieces of ice floating everywhere. My breath turned white. From the boat, I looked back up at the ship. The lights were still on. I could see people at the railings, waving, crying, shouting. Some were jumping into the sea. Others stood still, frozen in fear. The music was still playing. I could not believe it. The band was playing as the ship sank. Then the front of the Titanic disappeared under the water, and the back began to rise. People screamed. The lights flickered once, and then went out. We watched in silence as the greatest ship in the world broke in half, and then it was gone. Chapter 6. The Longest Night. When the Titanic disappeared into the Black Sea, the silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Our lifeboat floated in the dark, surrounded by cold water and quiet screams in the distance. People were calling for help, crying out into the night, but we could do nothing. The boat was already full, and the water was freezing. Anyone who stayed in the sea too long would not survive. We sat in silence, packed tightly together, shaking from the cold. The stars above were bright, but they gave no warmth. My hands were numb, and my face hurt from the wind. I looked around, at the others. Some were praying, some crying, and some just staring into nothing. I did not know what to say. I just kept rowing, slowly, trying to stay awake. Hours passed. We saw other lifeboats in the distance, their small lights like stars on the water. Some were quiet, others were calling out. A few boats had room and they pulled in people from the sea, but most, like ours, could not risk tipping over. It was the hardest part, knowing people were dying close by and we could not help. As the night went on, the cold grew worse. I closed my eyes and thought of home. I saw my mother's face, my father's hands, the fields where I used to walk as a boy. I thought of New York and the life I still hoped to find. I held those thoughts like fire in my mind, trying not to fall asleep. Then, just before the sun began to rise, someone shouted, "Look!" In the distance, a ship was coming. A real ship, big and strong, moving toward us. People began to cry. Some prayed louder. Others just smiled through their tears. The ship was the Carpathia. It had heard our signal and had come through the night to rescue us. When they pulled me on board, I could not feel my legs. I fell to the floor and looked up at the sky. The stars were gone. The sky was turning orange. I had survived. but I would never be the same again. Epilogue. A new life. It has been many years since that night. I now live in New York. I have a small home, a good job, and a family. But I still think about the Titanic. I think about the people I met, the voices I heard, and the faces I saw for the last time that night. I remember the music, the cold, the stars, and the silence after the ship was gone. Sometimes, I wake up in the middle of the night and feel the sea beneath me. Sometimes I hear the voices of those who didn't make it. I carry them with me. I speak for them. I live for them. The Titanic was more than a ship. It was a dream, a promise, a hope. It sank, but the stories did not. We must remember them, because even in the darkest water there was light, and even in the coldest night there was love. This is my story. Thank you for listening.